Welcome back, everybody. This is Ice, and I am playing Dead Frontier Outbreak 2. And not too long ago, I got shot. Well, someone shot at me, and I have to now choose what to do. And I choose to take cover.
I immediately dove for the nearest pillar as several more bullets were fired. Amazingly, I wasn't hit.
They're just a terrible shot.
The pillar offered temporary respite from my assailants, but it would only be a matter of time before they outflanked me. I couldn't see them, but I could hear them maneuvering on the floor above. I had to act fast if I was to have any chance of survival.
Open fire? I don't think that'll work. From my point of view here, they could get around and just shoot you. Or unless you're a really good shot, or make a run for it, but there's nowhere to run, you would get shot on the way. The only thing you can hope for is, I'm gonna take a gamble here, but I'm gonna try to negotiate. Oh no! When I pressed the, I accidentally double clicked, and it went to here. I realized that they had me totally pinned down, and that my chances of survival are... Actually, you know what, I'm not that good at reading because I talk too fast and I tend to mumble, like mess up my words, so you guys can probably just read it from there.
As I stood defenseless in the open, I explained that I hadn't been bitten and that I meant them no harm. The survivors whispered among themselves for a moment before one of them asked me to take off my clothes so they could see for themselves. I undressed and a man armed with a shotgun came down to inspect me. Finally satisfied that I wasn't about to eat them, the man asked me why I was here.
Tell them you're looking for food and ammo. Know that if they won't want to let you go, because if they do, then they'll think that... Yeah, you guys pretty much know where that's going. Tell them you're here to save them. No, they're pretty well armed. They'll probably just laugh at you. Tell them about the mission.
I decided it was best if I told the survivors the truth from the beginning. They'd probably find out sooner or later anyway. As I put my clothes back on and picked up my equipment, I explained all about the fortified farm, the disease that plagued my family, and my quest for antibiotics. They seemed impressed by my bravery and allowed me to join them on the second floor.
That's probably me down there.
As I climbed the escalator, I realized just how wise my decision to surrender had been. There were at least 20 survivors in the building, with over half of them armed with shotguns or rifles. The rest had an assortment of vicious-looking melee weapons. As soon as I reached the top, I was directed toward their leader, a tall and muscular African-American who introduced himself as Ox. Ox told me that if I wanted his help and protection, or at least to be allowed to roam his mall freely, I had to earn it. Apparently there was no longer any power in the mall, and he wanted someone to head down to the basement and turn on the generator. The last man he sent never came back.
Ask for extra equipment.
I told him I'd be happy to help, but that I desperately needed some more equipment if I was going to survive. He grudgingly agreed and got one of his lackeys to hand over some ammo. I was then informed that I'd be taking a mechanic named Smith along with me, partly to fix the generator if it needed it, and partly to make sure I didn't try anything stupid. Smith and I went back down the escalator and through the door I had originally come through to the stairwell. We headed back down, and then Smith pointed out another doorway hidden under the stairs that I hadn't noticed before.
Open the door slowly.
I carefully opened the door with my gun at the ready. Ox obviously thought this place was dangerous, so I kept my guard up.
We're being used. Actually, it's more like a trade.
On the other side of the door, it was pitch black. If there were any windows, they were small, and the curtains or blinds were closed. We listened carefully for any signs of the infected, but heard nothing.
That won't give you anything else. Don't even walk into the room without any light whatsoever. go back and find a torch. A torch is a flashlight if you didn't notice. Or if you didn't know. Just letting you know now.
I wasn't about to get eaten in the dark, so I told Smith to wait while I went and found a torch. The rest of the area had been a storeroom after all, so I hoped there might just be a torch tucked away somewhere. I was in luck. The torch was small, but it offered enough illumination for us to see our way to the generator. We reached the generator. Smith promptly pulled a lever and pressed a few buttons. Apparently getting the thing up and running was as simple as that, because it immediately sprang to life. The lights in the room flashed and came on, and just in time. Our activities had disturbed a small group of infected who had been lurking in a side room, and they were now rushing toward us. I opened fire and was easily able to gun the bastards down. I breathed a sigh of relief and turned to Smith, but to my horror he was lying on the floor, bleeding heavily. In the confusion I had accidentally shot him in the leg.
How can you shoot your friend? That's the stupidest thing you possibly can do. You have a first aid kit, and it's your fault that you shot him, so might as well patch him up.
I knew Smith didn't have a lot of time, so I quickly removed the first aid kit from my backpack and got to work. I used a tourniquet to staunch the bleeding, and then bandaged the wound. It wasn't much, but it was the best I could do. I helped him to his feet, and we headed back to the group. When we reached the stairwell, we were greeted by a terrifying noise. All the gunfire earlier, and now the bright lights of the mall had attracted a large group of infected who were trying to get in any way they could.
I thought zombies couldn't see.
Luckily, I had securely barricaded this area when I first entered the building. It wouldn't hold them for long, but it brought us enough time to get back to the group. By the time we got back to the group, they were already celebrating. Now the power was back on and they were focused on making the most of it while it lasted. Several had gotten one of the coffee shops up and running and were busy preparing hot food and drinks. Others were setting up a games console to entertain themselves while not on guard duty. Knowing about the threat from downstairs, it wasn't particularly reassuring. Smith had lost a lot of blood and was barely conscious when we arrived. Once I told him he had been shot, not bitten, Ox ordered some of the few women among the survivors to take care of him.
He just shot one of his friends. I don't think they're gonna give you a reward. You know there's danger, so don't get a cup of coffee. Yeah, I think warn them of danger.
There was no time to relax. The infected would be inside very soon, and if we weren't prepared, we'd be overrun in minutes. Before I could even finish explaining the situation, Ox was barking orders at his men, getting them into the best position to deal with the threat. They were only just in time. Suddenly, the basement door burst open, and a seemingly unstoppable horde of infected zombies charged through. The first wave was gunned down before they reached the escalator, but more and more of them just kept on coming. Every gun in the building was blazing while survivors armed with clubs and axes struggled to keep the tide of monsters from climbing the stairs. I had no idea if we'd be able to fight them off or not.
Your whole reason for coming here is to get medicine, so go to the pharmacy. With that many zombies, I don't think they're gonna last long. I'm not trying to be mean or anything. I don't want to abandon them, but your mission must come first. Other than,
I knew there was no way we'd be able to fight off the infected horde. My thoughts turned once again to my dying wife, and I realized that this might be my last chance to secure the antibiotics she so desperately needed. While the others held the infected at bay, I ran as fast as I could for the pharmacy. It took me less than a minute to reach the former drugstore. It had been totally untouched by looters, and all the various medicines were readily available. I could still hear the battle raging behind me, and I knew that I didn't have much time. Unfortunately, I wasn't alone. It seemed that the infected had found another way into the building, and several of them were now shambling straight toward me.
yeah, if you guys are noticing that the background keeps getting blurry and then focuses, that's actually just part of the game. It's not your computer already. Close the shutters.
I sprang immediately into action. jumping up to grab the bottom of the heavy iron shutters and pulling them down before the infected could get inside. I was only just in time. Had I have taken just one more second to lock them in place, I would have been devoured for sure. Now that I had the luxury of time, I thoroughly searched the pharmacy for the antibiotics I needed. I filled my backpack with as much of the stuff as I could, and then made my way out of the shop through the back door. I found myself in some sort of staff-only area that would normally have been off-limits to the general public. There were corridors leading to various offices and storage areas behind the back of the shops, but I had no time for sightseeing. I followed the signs and headed straight for the stairs. As I turned a corner, I heard a scream and the sounds of a struggle. One of the female survivors had also tried to make an escape, but had been ambushed by one of the infected. She had dropped her pistol and was now struggling to keep the monster from biting her. There was no way I could get a clean shot at the zombie, and even if I could, she had probably been infected already. I shot them both and then carried onto the stairs.
I'm not trying to be mean, but that's pretty much what would happen. You know, you gotta be fast because everything's right behind you, chasing you. And those gunshots probably just alerted more, so... you know, you can't take chances in a zombie apocalypse, so... you gotta be smart about it.
As I reached the stairwell, I became all too aware that the sound of gunfire, a constant companion for the last few minutes, had suddenly stopped.
See, that's what I mean.
Had the survivors fought off the infected, or had they all been wiped out? I had no way of knowing either way.
They mostly got wiped out. And that's why you gotta move fast, or I'm pretty sure they're gonna be after you. Because you just shot your gun and they probably heard and they're after you now. Take the stairs to the roof.
I wasn't going to risk heading back to the group. In my heart, I knew they were all dead, and either way I needed to get home to save my wife. I ran up the stairs, out of the fire escape, and onto the roof. I stepped out into the open air and breathed a sigh of relief. I was on the top level of a multi-story car park which seemed to be blessedly free of zombies. There were also plenty of parked cars in relatively good condition, perfect for a swift and safe ride home. I suddenly noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. I span round and took aim, expecting it to be one of the infected. To my relief and surprise, it was a handful of survivors who had managed to escape the carnage downstairs. Before I could meet up with them, something leaped at me from the shadows, knocking my gun from my hands and nearly pushing me to the floor. I regained my balance just in time to defend myself from the creature's next assault.
Kneeing in the groin won't do anything. They don't feel pain, so punching in the face won't do anything. You have to throw that fucker over the edge.
As the zombie ran forward, I grabbed it by the neck with both hands. Realizing he'd be unable to bite me, I pushed him back with all my might, forcing him toward the railings. It took every ounce of strength that I had remaining, but I managed to shove the infected bastard over the edge. A few seconds later, I heard a sickening splat as his body hit the ground. Now that the immediate danger had been dealt with, I had to decide how best to get back to the ground floor. As I picked up my gun, I took another look around. There were plenty of parked cars that I could steal, and the other survivors had already begun hot-wiring an SUV.
Join the other survivors.
I decided that my best bet was to join up with the other survivors. They seemed pleased to see another living human, and were totally overjoyed when I told them I had somewhere safe to go. Since I was the only one who knew the way, they let me drive. As we made our way down through the car park, we realized just how fortunate we had been. The place was crawling with infected, and there was no way we could have escaped on foot. I sped out of the car park, breaking through the wooden barrier and skidding out onto the main road. I chose the most direct route I could think of, back toward the compound, and drove as fast as I could. I didn't get far, though. Not more than 2 blocks down the street, I came across the remains of a serious traffic accident. Several vehicles blockaded the road.
If I remember correctly, on movies, you can always just push them out of the way and zombies will never come at you at that point. People always make it.
It was risky, but I had to clear a path somehow. I jumped out of the car and began to push the other vehicles out of the way. Luckily, the previous owners had not bothered to put the brakes on before abandoning their vehicles, so it was relatively easy to roll them out of the way. Once I had cleared a path, I jumped back inside and drove off. As I looked down the road ahead of me, I realized that making my escape might not be as easy as I first thought. A huge mob of infected assembled on the street ahead.
Accelerate and run the bastards over. I think turn to the back road.
I wasn't going to risk driving through a ravenous horde of the infected unnecessarily. I turned off down a small back road and took another route back to the compound. It was a little more time-consuming, but a lot less suicidal. I finally made it out of the town and back to the countryside. The sun was setting in the distance behind me. I had been through a lot that day and was glad that I would soon be reunited with my loving wife. Just when I thought I was out of danger, the engine began to make strange clunking noises. I prayed that it would last until I got home, but God didn't seem to be listening.
I say walk the rest of the way.
I knew I had no hope of fixing the problem, and it was far too dangerous to waste time trying. The compound was only an hour's walk or so away, so I abandoned the vehicle and resolved to carry on foot. After a long and terrifying walk through the gloom of twilight, I finally arrived at my father-in-law's compound. I was mentally and physically exhausted and wanted nothing more than to crawl into bed, cuddle up to my wife, and fall into a deep sleep. I was expecting a far warmer welcome than I received. Despite my heroic efforts on their behalf, the guards wisely insisted that my companions and I prove we hadn't been bitten before being allowed in. Once more I had to strip down to my skin to show that I would remain among the living. With the formalities over and done with, we were finally allowed inside. As soon as the gates were safely closed behind me, my father-in-law ran out from the farmhouse and uncharacteristically gave me a hug. Then he asked me about the medicine. I smiled and showed him the contents of my backpack. I had secured enough antibiotics to treat everyone who lived in the compound, myself included. We wasted no time in delivering them to everyone who needed it. Over the course of the next few days, the compound began to recover. With the exception of the 2 worst cases, everyone survived the illness and were soon back on their feet. Most importantly of all, I had saved my beautiful wife yet again.
Sweet. There we go. Survived the day, yes. Got the antibiotics, yes. Tactics rank B. You have reasonable understanding of zombie outbreaks and moderate survival skills. You have a 50-50 chance of surviving a real outbreak. Rank A. Despite the intense physiological pressures of the outbreak, you remain a kind-hearted and generous person. Yes! I will most likely survive a real outbreak. So the question is, will you guys? Try this game, yeah, try this game. Don't do it the way I did. Try it a different way, like the way you want to, because it's not the only way to survive. There are other ways, but that's how I would probably do it. So, thanks for watching, everybody. This was part 2 of Outbreak, and as you can see, there's part 1 up there. I don't really feel like doing that. I've already played it so many times before, and that's how I know how to get through zombie apocalypse a little bit well. But anyways, thanks for watching. more videos like this I will try to find. Like, I will try to find games like this. So, thanks for watching, everybody. Stay pressed.